did this come about? What was the process that made this happen?
One of the things that we thought about when we started the research was that we wanted to understand, kind of feel our way a bit into zines and zine culture. And I guess part of that seemed to be about starting to think through making zines. So I think this methodology zine came about at the point where Helen and I had some initial discussions about how we wanted to approach the research. Ideas about not wanting to analyze zines from sort of some outside kind of position, to be analyzing the content of the zines, but more being with zines, feeling into them, seeing what they generated in us, and begin to get zines moving around. I'm trying to remember, Helen, how we actually came to making a zine, but I think anyway, I started to just get out some paper and pens and a Pritt stick and began to make something. Can you remember, Helen?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. This is a while ago now. I mean, I think when we put the proposal together for funding for this project, we were thinking quite a lot about our methodology, and we knew that we had to do something quite unique, that it had to be a kind of specific MadZine methodology. And the two things that we were sort of thinking about, which comes up in those two things, about zine culture and mad culture, and wanting our research to kind of be congruent with that and not at odds with it. So we didn't want to sort of analyze mad people or analyze, mad zines sort of stuff psychologically or anything like that. And we wrote a blog on our website about where we'd got to after a few months of doing this. And the other thing we put in our proposal was that we wanted to use Arthur Frank's idea, because he talks about not analyzing stories, but being with them and seeing what they do. And we were kind of thinking that we'd like to use that idea in zines and thinking with zines rather than about them as such. So I think Jill went off and made the zine about it, really. And I think I can't remember how we got from the discussion to the actual zine. But I think it worked, because what it is it kind of it's literally stitched together some of these ideas that we were developing, and it can be added to and stitched into, if you like, because this is a really evolving methodology that we started with a vague idea, and then we started to try and stitch into it certain ideas that Jill has worked with over the last year.
So did it start with a discussion and then one person make, or is that how it happened?
Yeah, pretty much. Jill made that zine. I can't really claim, unfortunately, any artistic involvement in it, unfortunately.
When I was putting it together, I had in mind a conversation that we'd had about research as there's this word bricolage or collage or patchwork, or that we were seeing the project as something that would, rather than having it all a sort of very clear plan from the outset of exactly what we're going to do and what the stages would be, that it was something that would evolve. And so I think that idea of patchwork or a quilt was in my head, which is why the zine is in the form that it's in. So I think that might be a good example of how, through making things ourselves, we start to think about some of the issues that we're wanting to explore about other people's zines. So in this case, form. And I guess one of the ironies of it was I sent it to Helen and she opened it, and when we were talking about it afterwards, she said, it's like a board game. And I thought, oh, no, it wasn't meant to be a board game. It was meant to be a quilt. But I think, that kind of brought in a new idea around board games. And I just think it made me realize how different it is making something and exchanging it, and the kind of ways that generates ideas that are different. But it was also, there was something quite delightful, enjoyable about sending this through the post to Helen, thinking about her picking it up. It felt like a more pleasurable process than pressing send on a piece of writing, which would always leave me feeling a bit anxious and worried about how it would be received.
And just to add a couple of things to that, on the cover you can see it says seamful, and I think that sort of speaks to that. So we used Paula Cameron's idea of zines as being seamful, so they show all their seams. This is both how we're seeing our research and our methodology, and what Jill's saying in a way about sending stuff before it's kind of finished and finalized, is that it's really nice to be able to share things that show their seams, that show the workings of them, that don't just, you know, end up with a nice polished product. Or, you know, like most research projects, when they end, they kind of say that they developed this amazing methodology and they use this methodology. It's almost as if it was developed and unproblematic. And actually, most methodologies are messy. You know, that, you know, you pick and choose stuff works, some stuff doesn't work. And it's not necessarily as it seems, as the final product, if you like, or the academic paper doesn't really often reflect the messiness of a research project and its methodology. So we wanted to kind of show that.
So how do you feel about making that public? So actually sharing what is part of the process. Do you feel confident about that, or is there some nervousness?
I think there is some nervousness, but I also do feel confident about it, because I feel quite strongly that researchers need to be much more honest about the messiness of it, and that it actually, because I don't think it helps us as researchers to, if we're coming into research, to think that, you know, it all works really well and that you just need to choose a methodology and then apply it and then you get your amazing results and analysis. And research, qualitative research anyway, and probably quantitative too, doesn't work like that. So I think, yes, I feel quite confident in doing that. But I suppose I'm maybe in a better position to do that being a more senior researcher now, that I feel more confident doing that, and maybe would have been less so early in my career, maybe when I was less confident with doing that. So I think there is something about showing those seams that might be difficult to do. And I guess that relates to what Jill was saying about more academic writing.
Yeah, and I think just picking up on that, I'm aware of, because I did a PhD not that long ago, and I felt like I was, although I was supervised, I was making decisions a lot on my own, and I found that harder. I think one of the good things about working in a team is that you can actually, if you're wondering whether something is ready to be shared or you know, then you're making that decision collectively. And so I think in this project, we've been using blog posts as a way to share our thinking as it evolves. And so those seem to me to be somewhere between just kind of sharing stuff on Twitter or, you know, perhaps more unprocessed thoughts, and, you know, very finished, polished outputs, that we're thinking quite hard about them, and we're working on making them readable and hopefully interesting, but we're releasing them to the outside world before they're fixed in a way that they couldn't move anymore. So we're really wanting to get other people's responses to them, I suppose.
And can I just say sorry, do you mind if I just, we could talk about this all day, all week probably. But I've noticed that I'd forgotten that Jill had put the mirror in that zine in the middle, I think. We wanted the research to mirror zine culture and mad culture. So we wanted it to reflect it in some way. And what's nice about zines and this sort of method, you can add a little mirror to the zine, which I really like, that you can actually do that with this. You couldn't do that in an academic paper, you know. And it's just nice that it sort of really shows that in an effective way that I quite like.
And even things like the envelopes, I think that you vaguely touched on, but it's really interesting, the idea that a zine turns up through the post and there has that excitement of almost a birthday card or a gift rather than just a bill. Yeah. And you don't, as you mentioned, Jill, you don't get that with an email when you click send. No.
This excerpt is taken from an online meeting that was recorded in September 2021. It's part of a Wellcome-funded project called MadZines Research Crafting Contention, the role of zines in contesting mental health knowledge and practice. This research project explores how zines craft contention about mental health and can help turn individual struggles into critical issues for society. For more information about this project, visit madzines.org.